The silence was not peace. It was a vacuum waiting to be filled by violence. It was the specific, ringing silence that follows the tearing of wood and the screaming of metal. Lieutenant Tom Calloway, intelligence officer for the British 1st Airborne Division, hung suspended in his harness inside the splintered ribcage of a Horsa glider. The aircraft, Chalk 44, had ceased to be a flying machine and was now just a collection of plywood and canvas. Scattered across a turnip field near Wolfheze, it was Sunday, September 17, 1944. The sky above the Netherlands was a brilliant, deceptive blue, innocent of the carnage it had just delivered. Tom's normal was the smell of damp wool, the metallic taste of adrenaline, and the crushing weight of a map case that contained the lives of 10,000 men. He was 32, a former schoolmaster from Yorkshire. War had been fought in the margins of operational orders and the fine print of reconnaissance photos. He didn't carry a Bren gun. He carried the plan. And the plan said that today was a Sunday walk. He unbuckled his harness, dropping 3 feet to the canted deck of the glider. His knees cracked a sound louder to him than the distant roar of the departing Dakota tug planes. Around him, the squad was stirring, pulling jeeps and trailers out of the wreckage. They were grinning. They were lighting cigarettes. "Bit of a bump, eh, sir?" Sergeant Nobby Clark laughed, dusting off his maroon beret. "Better than the boat ride to Normandy, though. Dry feet." "Get the jeeps off, Nobby," Tom said, his voice sounding thin in the open air. "We have to hit the rendezvous. The general wants the HQ set up by 15 o'clock. Tom stepped out of the broken fuselage into the sunlight. The landing zone LZ was a scene of surreal, festive chaos. Hundreds of gliders lay scattered like discarded toys. Paratroopers were gathering chutes, organizing equipment, and waving at the Dutch civilians who were already emerging from the woods. The locals brought apples, water, and flowers. It looked like a village fete, not an invasion. This was the market part of Operation Market Garden. The carpet of airborne troops laid out to pave the way for the garden, the armored thrust coming from the south. The intelligence briefing, delivered by the supreme confidence of Field Marshal Montgomery, burned into Tom's mind. The German forces in the area are negligible. Old men on bicycles and boys with broken rifles. The panzer divisions have been broken in Normandy. It will be a WALKOVER. Tom walked toward the tree line, checking his watch. 13:45. They were on schedule. He felt the familiar, comforting weight of the Webley revolver at his hip, a symbol of authority he rarely used. His job was to link up with the Dutch resistance contact, verify the drop zones for the second lift, and establish the intelligence picture. But the normal of the Wartha chaotic, but manageable friction of deployment felt wrong here. It was too perfect. The sun was too bright. The reception was too warm. He reached the edge of the woods where a jeep from the reconnaissance squadron was idling. The driver, a corporal named Milligan, looked worried. "Sir," Milligan said, saluting lazily. "Radio's dead. Can't raise division. Can't raise the RAF. It's just static. It's the trees." Corporal Tom said, reciting the technical excuse they had been given in England. "The crystals will settle. Keep trying." "It's not the trees, sir," Milligan muttered, tapping the set. "It's dead quiet. Like there's no one out there." Tom ignored him, pushing through the brush to the secondary rendezvous point, a small farmhouse with a thatched roof. This was where he was supposed to meet Hendrik. The local resistance leader, Hendrik, was there, but he wasn't carrying flowers. He was a small, wire-thin man in a worn coat, shivering despite the heat. He was arguing with a British major, pointing frantically at a map spread on a barrel. "Sir, you must listen." Hendrik was shouting in broken English. "The woods. The Wolfheze woods. They are not empty." The major, a man Tom knew as a staunch believer in the old men and boys theory, was shaking his head, smiling indulgently. "Calm down, old boy. We've got the perimeter secured. No bicycle troops seen yet. Tom stepped forward. What is it, Major? Local jitters. Calloway, the Major sighed. He thinks he saw a tank. Hendrik spun on Tom, his eyes wide and bloodshot. Not think. Seen yesterday. And this morning. In the infinite silence of the forest. ... Heavy engines, clanking, not trucks. Tom looked at the Dutchman. He saw the terror. It wasn't the panic of a civilian. It was the specific hollow-eyed fear of a man who knows a secret that is about to get everyone killed. Show me, Tom said quietly. Calloway, we have to get to the bridge, the Major snapped. Don't waste time with ghost stories. Go ahead, Major. I'll catch up. I need to verify the resistance line. Tom followed Hendrik away from the celebration on the LZ into the deeper, denser pine forest to the north. The sounds of the cheering Dutch and the laughing soldiers faded, replaced by the hush that follows an air raid, a heavy, expectant silence. The pine needles muffled their boots. They walked for 10 minutes. The air grew cooler, smelling of resin and damp earth. Then the disturbance arrived. It wasn't a sound. It was a smell. It cut through the pine scent like a knife. It was the thick, oily, unmistakable stench of high-octane gasoline and hot, unwashed steel. It was the smell of a garage amplified 1,000 times. Hendrik stopped and pointed at the ground. Tom looked down. The forest track, usually a path for carts, had been churned into a wide, muddy trench. The earth was torn up in deep, parallel grooves. Tank tracks, and not just any tank. Tom knelt, placing his hand in the imprint. It was wide, nearly 3 feet wide. Sherman, Hendrik whispered. Tom shook his head. Too wide, too heavy. He traced the pattern of the cleats. The recognizable chevron of the Allied tanks was missing. This was a complex, interlocking pattern. He reached into the mud and pulled out a small, metallic object that had been pressed into the earth. It was a grease cap, stamped with a serial number and a manufacturer's mark. Man, a xenophobic. Augsburg-Nuremberg. Tom felt the blood drain from his face. Man didn't make bicycles. They made the Panther tank, and the grease on the cap was still warm. Wait, Tom whispered. He pulled out his notebook. He unfolded a piece of paper he had been given just before takeoff, a last-minute intercept from a reconnaissance Spitfire that had flown over Arnhem the day before. The photo had been blurred, dismissed by the analysts as shadows or mechanically unserviceable vehicles. He looked at the photo. Then he looked at the tracks. The disturbance crystallized. The convoy that never arrived, the phantom column of German armor that Montgomery had sworn didn't exist, was here. It wasn't a convoy of trucks. It was the 2 SS Panzer Corps, the 9th and 10th SS Panzer Divisions. The veterans of the Eastern Front. They weren't broken. They were refitting. Right here. In Arnhem, the old men and boys were actually the deadliest armored unit in the German army. Tom stood up, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. We have to go back. We have to warn the general. They're dropping the battalion right on top of a panzer division. Too late, Hendrik said, tilting his head. Tom listened at first. It sounded like the wind, a low, rising moan. Then it deepened into a growl. Then a roar. The ground began to vibrate. Not the vibration of a glider landing, but the rhythmic tectonic shaking of heavy machinery. Moving in unison, clank-squeak. Clank-squeak. From the north, from the direction of the secure perimeter, came the sound. And then, the precise, factual disturbance manifested in the airwaves. Tom grabbed his walkie-talkie. The short-range set that Milligan had said was working. He tuned to the battalion frequency. Sunray, this is Leopard Leader. Contact. Heavy armor. Tiger tanks. Multiple bogies. We are bouncing off them. Repeat, rounds are bouncing off. Leopard, say again. Did you say tigers? Affirmative. Tigers and panthers. They're coming out of the tree line. They were waiting for us. It's a trap. Oh God, there. The transmission cut out with a screech of static and the sound of a high-velocity gun firing. Tom dropped the radio. The order to seize the bridge had been based on a lie. The intelligence was not just flawed. It was a death sentence. He looked at Hendrik. Run. Get to your people. Tell them to hide. And you. I have to find the general. Tom sprinted back toward the landing zone. The festive atmosphere was gone. The silence had shattered. The sound of MG-42 machine guns that terrified, ripping canvas. Noise was echoing from the woods. He reached the edge of the clearing just as the first mortar rounds began to fall. The Dutch civilians were scattering, dropping their apples, screaming. The paratroopers, confused, were trying to dig in with their small entrenching tools. Tom found the major he had spoken to earlier. He was standing by a jeep, looking through binoculars, his face pale. Major? Tom screamed, grabbing his arm. It's the 2S. The Panzers. They're refitting here. The woods are full of them. The major lowered the binoculars. He looked at Tom with dead eyes. I know, Calloway. I just saw a half-track blow up Nobby's jeep. They aren't refitting. They're counterattacking. The realization hit Tom with the force of a physical blow. The market hadn't just been dropped on an anvil. It had been dropped into a grinder. The bridge too far wasn't a metaphor for distance. It was a metaphor for the gap between ambition and reality. It was a metaphor for the gap between ambition and reality.